What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you major tips that you can utilize as soon as you're done with your drafts in franchise mode that are going to give you an edge over other teams within your franchise. Now, this can apply to user and CPU leagues. We are currently on Madden 22 on next gen. However, this also applies to previous Maddens. I've actually made a very similar video in the past, but I want to get it updated so we have all the best information for you guys. Now, to start off in today's video, we're going to be starting off in a fresh franchise after a draft right here, and we're going to walk you through every single step that you need to take that isn't really going to take all that much effort, but can help give you an edge in franchise mode as you head through the draft and into preseason and into the regular season. Now, our first step that we want to look into whenever we are done with the draft, because most leagues are going to advance quickly from the off-season roster adjustment phase, which is the week after the draft. Most teams are going to advance quickly to the preseason because you can still adjust your roster in the preseason. There's really no reason for this week to be here because you can still edit players, move them around. Even if you don't have commissioner powers, you can always switch players around in terms of their positions and stuff like that. So most leagues are going to quickly advance here to the next week, and we're going to get into preseason week 1. And this is where you're going to have some very important steps that you're going to want to take care of before anybody else in your franchise. Now, the very first thing that you guys are going to want to take advantage of is undrafted free agents. You definitely want to make sure that you have first dibs on any undrafted free agents that are potentially high overall, very young age, meaning 20, 21, 22 years old, or could help your team in some way. So what you have the advantage of here in franchise mode is in the top right-hand corner of the screen there, you guys are going to see that you have a 75-man roster in the preseason. You have the advantage of being able to sign basically as many players as you could possibly want to have on your team. So you're going to go to manage roster here on Madden 22. It's very similar on previous Maddens as well. You're just going to go to the free agency pool, and what you're going to do is you're going to go out here and sort by age. This is the most important step that you guys can do. Now, this is actually a very important point because most of the top players are going to be older players within franchise mode, so you're going to have to do this position by position. Now, you're obviously going to want to go after the more important positions to you or the more valuable positions within your franchise, whether that be cornerback, whether that be quarterback, whether that be wide receiver, or anything of the sort. You're going to want to go position by position because if you just sort by overall, as I did right here, it's only bringing up the top 100 players, which are more than likely not going to be any of those UDFAs. However, when I go position by position and sort by age, I am going to have those available UDFAs, 21, 22, 23-year-old players that could potentially help my team. And as I scroll through each position, there's going to be a handful of very nice UDFAs at each of those positions. For example, here we found one very early 2 positions in, Niles Rodriguez, a 21-year-old 66 overall running back with 91 speed. That's a pretty good running back to start off with, whether you're going to utilize him on your practice squad, whether you're going to utilize him as a backup, or maybe you just try to take that 21-year-old and make him into a beast that's a franchise player for you. You could do that at most of these positions because there are going to be UDFA players available and some positions more than others. As you guys can see with wide receiver here, there are quite a few very solid rookie wide receivers. We have a 69 overall 22-year-old with 94 speed that is a UDFA that nobody drafted. This is a player that you would absolutely want to have on your team, and I think you guys can probably now see why I say this is the very first thing that you want to pay attention to after the draft, because if you're not paying attention to this, I guarantee you somebody else in your franchise is, and they're going to scoop up these players before you have an opportunity to. So you want to make sure that this is the very first thing that you do, and you go out and scoop up these players so your opponents aren't getting an advantage over you. Now, the next thing to do here is actually just very similar to this, and it is to go out and pick up the best free agents that fit your team and fit your needs. Very often, you'll see free agents out here left over in free agency, and don't know why I'm saying free agents over and over again, you'll find players out here that could be incredibly valuable to your team that were left over through free agency. And more often than not, they're going to be significantly cheaper than you would have gotten them for in free agency. This is why a lot of times these players do slip through to this phase, because nobody's going to want to pay them a massive contract like they might be asking for in the offseason. And therefore, you're going to have some very talented players out here to choose from that can help fill out your roster. Again, as I mentioned, you're going to have 75 roster spots at this point, so why not go out if you have the salary cap space for it and bring in some of these players that could potentially help your team grow in overall and help your team develop. Now, there are going to be potentially younger players out here that could significantly help your team. So this is why I'm emphasizing free agency to you guys. As soon as you hit that preseason week 1 stage, there are so many players that slip through, whether they are older veterans, maybe slightly middle-aged / younger veterans that are in that 24, 25, 26-year-old range, or you could find all those UDFAs and fill out your roster that way. Nonetheless, you really want to prioritize this, because if you're not prioritizing this, like I said, they're going to get scooped up by other teams. If you're in a franchise with CPU teams, they're going to get scooped up by CPU teams, and you're going to be left with basically you're going to be left in the dust, and other teams are going to have these players that are going to develop into potential studs, or they'll fill out other teams' rosters, and you're at a disadvantage then. So you absolutely want to make sure that you prioritize UDFAs and free agents as you hit preseason week 1. And next up, we're going to want to make sure that for number 3 on the list, we adjust our depth chart immediately. We want to make sure that we're going in and putting any of our youngest players on the top of our depth chart, because more often than not, the game's not going to do that. So if you draft a very good rookie, you want to make sure that they're up at the top of your depth chart. You want to make sure that players aren't being buried on your depth chart as you move through preseason. Now, the reason that I say this more than anything else is most franchises are going to quickly advance through preseason. Not a lot of people actually enjoy playing preseason. I don't mind it, but there are most franchises that are going to just fly through preseason. But you're still going to be doing weekly training and earning XP each of those weeks. You're also going to be earning experience points for those games played. So if your young players and your rookies are not on the depth chart as you move through preseason, and you don't set that depth chart ahead of advancement, they're going to be stuck down there on the depth chart, and they're not going to get XP for games that they should be playing in. Now, some people, depending on whether you leave injuries on or take injuries off, may or may not want those players in the game anyway, because they don't want them getting injured. But more often than not, like I said, teams or franchises are going to sim through preseason quickly. A lot of them actually take injuries off for preseason because of that reason, because they're simming through preseason. So you want to make sure that you have your developmental players in the lineup to make sure that they're getting stats and make sure that they're getting XP for you. Likewise, we're going to want to go into our weekly training and make sure that we set our focus players. And again, this is going to apply to all Maddens. You want to make sure that you set your focus players over here for your weekly training to make sure that they're not messed up. More often than not, whenever you go into franchise mode and you get towards the beginning of preseason, it's going to just throw 3 random players in here. It could be your draft picks, but it could also be older players. You at the very least want to check this to make sure you're focus training the right guys. So right here we have 3 normal development players being focus trained, and they might not necessarily be the most important players on my team to focus train that I need to develop. So instead, I'm going to go in here and maybe pick some star players, some superstar players, and try to get better development on those guys. Again, this is something that you can do very quickly at the start of preseason in your first week, and then those focus players are going to save the rest of the way for you as we head through preseason, so and into the regular season. Unless a player gets injured, they're not going to get taken off of your focus players list, so you're definitely going to want to make sure that you have these selected and you're developing the right guys, especially if you drafted some hidden development rookies or something of that nature at a very important position. You're really going to want to make sure that that player is getting XP as you move through preseason and sim through preseason. Now, one quick note here, in prior years, you had the option to select which positions your drills focused on. So in Madden 22, it doesn't quite work that way. The entire team is going to get XP based on your offensive and defensive game plan training. However, in prior Maddens, you have to focus on certain positions, and you definitely want to make sure that you're selecting which positions to focus on with those drills, because again, you're going to have certain positions that you want to develop faster than others, and you're missing out on XP for important developmental players if you are not doing that and everybody else in your franchise is. Now, in Madden 22, we got the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and this is something that a lot of people are tempted to click on as soon as you advance to preseason week 1 in franchise mode, because this does actually give you some nice boosts to your players. However, what I recommend is, because most people are going to click on this right away and maybe watch the little cutscene that comes along with it, I recommend that you guys use that opportunity to get a jump on your opponents and go out to free agency and go do these things that I was talking about, and save the Hall of Fame induction as the last thing that you do in preseason week 1. You'll have time to get back around to it, but make sure you're prioritizing the right things in preseason week 1 and then jump into the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So right here, you're getting a quick look at this. I'm just going to go ahead and hold X to skip, and it's going to give +5 finesse moves for all linebackers for the next 6 weeks. You're definitely going to want to click on this scenario, because if you don't, you're not going to get the boost. You have to make sure that you open up this scenario to actually go ahead and get the boost. But like I said, it's very quick. You can skip through the video. You want to reserve that as the last thing you do in preseason week 1 on Madden 22. Now, real quick, as I advance to preseason week 2, I want to just quickly note that you do want to utilize your upgrades as they come in, because the players, as you simulate through preseason, will perform based on their ratings. So you're going to want to make sure that you go in and utilize your upgrades so that they can potentially perform better for you as you move through the preseason in those simulations. This can, again, help give your franchise the edge, help give your players the edge, and honestly help them gain more XP, because hopefully they're going to perform better as you do that. Now, as we approach the end of this video, there are a couple of more final things that you're going to want to take care of as you move through to the regular season. Real quick, as we hit preseason week 4, now titled preseason bye week, you're going to want to make sure that you again go into free agency and check what is available in free agency. The reason being for this is when you hit preseason week 4, or the preseason bye as it's called now, you're going to be forced to put players on the practice squad, and so is every single other team in the league. They have to cut down to 53 players. So more than likely, you're going to be able to find very good players out here that are potentially practice squad players, or players that were cut from their teams that weren't out here during the rest of the preseason. And the reason for that, like I said, is because only in preseason week 4 do teams get forced to cut down to 53 players on their roster. So you definitely want to come out here and check what's available as you hit preseason week 4. Real quick, I also recommend that you guys fill out your practice squad with as many players as you possibly can at this point in time. Right now, I only have 49 players or something along those lines on my roster. Well, I'm losing out on potential developmental prospects if I don't fill out my roster to 53 players and also put the 10 to 12 players on my practice squad that I'm eligible to put on my practice squad. Why not go out there and just sign those players? They don't cost you anything to have on your roster. They're free to cut if you need to cut them. You might as well bring them up and try to develop them. They will earn XP as they sit there on your practice squad throughout the season. So you might as well pick those players up, and you never know, they might help contribute to your team one day. And then the final two topics that I want to discuss are going to be very quick here. Whenever you hit regular season week 1, you're again going to want to go through and check free agents. Now, the reason behind this is very similar to the reason behind why you're going to want to check it in preseason week 4. Teams realize that players have now been put on the practice squad out there, and they are available to them to sign. So when you advance from the practice squad cutting phase up to regular season week 1, other teams in the league are going to say, oh, this guy's available and he's better than what I have. So let me sign this guy and cut this other player, or put this other player on my practice squad. So you're going to get 3 completely different lists of free agents and available practice squad players in preseason week 1, preseason week 4, and regular season week 1. You definitely want to pay attention to this because, again, you can find some very solid players out there that could help your team. Troy Pride Jr. right here, for example, was not available at all during the preseason. Now I have access to a 24-year-old, 72 overall, 5'11", 93 speed cornerback that could be an excellent depth or developmental player on my team. You definitely want to pay attention to this because, like I said, everyone else or some other players are definitely going to be paying attention to it, and they're going to take advantage of it. So you might as well give yourself that advantage as opposed to letting somebody else do that. And then last but not least, you're going to want to make sure that you check over other teams' practice squads to see if there aren't players that are worthwhile for you to steal from those practice squads and sign to your team. For example, here, there's all these wide receivers that are now on practice squads for other teams. Oftentimes, you'll see players that were not UDFAs or were not out there and available before get placed on the practice squad because of the signing of other free agents and the cutting of other free agents. So these things change. And one way that you can easily go ahead and check who exactly is on every team's practice squad in the league is go to the roster and scroll to practice squad. All you have to do is hold R2 and go up once to practice squad. You can then scroll through every single team and you can very easily see what each team has on their practice squad. This might not be the most efficient way to do it, but you can certainly make sure that you have all the information at your disposal in order to make sure you're not missing out on somebody that is potentially available to you to help your team. And that's it, guys. Hopefully this information was useful to you. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to this channel for more great content, tips, and tricks videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure you guys comment down below as well with anything else you could use help on or what you want to see next. Like I said, I'll see you in the next one, and I hope you have a good one.